And we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans, it's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just three nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're giving you a bonus episode this week. This will be episode number 3 this week because it's time sensitive. And we appreciate all of you for tolerating us jabbering on for an extra episode. But before we get started, Mr. Frank Morin, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm Frank Morin. I'm a fantasy author. I've got about 15, 16 novels out right now. Been writing for a long time. Got some young adult epic fantasy and some urban fantasy thrillers. And my latest one is Bacon Master of the Apocalypse, humorous epic fantasy that I think we'll be talking about some tonight.
Absolutely. And so the next part of the introduction, dear listener, is how we met. So this is a little known secret, but Frank and I actually met on a secret assignment for the CIA. We were on a hunt for a few escaped ET and a talking teddy bear. Don't ask. It was weird, but what can you do? Anyway, things got out of hand, so we had to make them into a few movies just so we had plausible deniability. So officially, this never happened. Just saying. You didn't hear it from us.
Yeah, we really can't talk about it.
All right. So before we let you get too deep in this interview, sir, you have to answer the religion question. Are you ready?
Sure.
Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Ooh. Firefly.
Go on.
What else do you need to know?
Well, so what makes Firefly special to you, or your favorite?
I love Firefly. I really wish they had gotten that first season right so they could do some more, like everyone who's watched it, I guess. For me, the characters are awesome. The character interplay and just, the concept of them, riding the black around the edges of space, trying to stay free despite the oppressive government trying to crack down. And, the characters are awesome. Mal is, amazing, trying to come across as a tough guy, but, he's got the gooey center that he just can't escape. So, yeah, for me, that series just works fantastically well. Great action, great humor, really cool sci-fi.
Okay, that works. Yeah. And because we are polytheistic, Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, or Conan the Barbarian?
For me, it would be Wheel of Time. For me, that was one of the stories that really was kind of a huge kind of work for me. I started getting me deeper into epic fantasy. I'm a huge epic fantasy fan. I always have. And Eye of the World, book one of the Wheel of Time is one of my all-time favorite books. I've reread that one many times, and just a great, huge world. Totally fits exactly the kind of fantasy that I love. So when I first started writing fantasy, that's the kind of fantasy I wrote. My first book was this enormous 300,000 word monstrosity that will never see the light of day. But I enjoyed writing it for like 4 years. It was a great way to kind of start the effort in the process of writing. But they say don't start with your epic, and there's a lot of reason for that. But of course I did, and it failed, but it was a great launching point for me.
So are you familiar with author who writes sort of space fantasy, Glenn Stewart?
Who's that?
Glenn Stewart. He writes space fantasy.
I don't think so. I'm terrible with names, so I may know it, but I've just forgotten it.
So he wrote a series when he was like 19, and it was the same thing. And he thought it would have them bones to be worth trying to save. So I ended up getting an author whose work I love, Terry Mixon, and together they co-wrote it and took the one story and basically I think they wrote it into 5 novels. The idea.
Oh, awesome.
And one of the things they said talking about that when you go to edit it, it's almost like having a third author. Him now. Him at 19, and then the co-writer, because so much changes in your your worldview, your writing style, your voice. So while it might not be ready for prime time now, that doesn't mean the idea doesn't have merit and couldn't be saved.
Absolutely. And actually, that's a good point, because I wrote that book, and of course it failed because I was, I was a new writer and indie publishing wasn't a thing, thankfully, because I would have tried to release it and it would have flopped. But I ended up getting to the point where I understood the problems with it, burned it, had a little ceremony in the backyard, and rewrote it. It was only a 200,000 word epic fantasy, and actually had that one several years, kind of running around from one major publisher to another, who all ended up saying, "We love this book, but we're not going to buy it." And I'm actually planning to release that one this year. I've got the first 2 books in that series done. I just haven't ever done anything with them, but I'm trying to get more into Royal Road. It's not a lit RPG, which I know is kind of the biggest thing on Royal Road, but they have a bunch of fantasy too, and I think it might fit that audience. So I'm going to start putting some chapters out there and see what people think, and see what we can do with that, because that's a story that is hugely epic and close to my heart. So I'm hoping we can start finding some interest this year later with it. So we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. So we here at the Blasters and Blades love both the scientific and the fantastical, but what was your first love, sci-fi or fantasy?
Oh, I read everything. I was a huge reader as a teen, and started getting into writing, and then kind of set that aside. So I get into my career as a computer programmer, which I still do computer consulting on the side. And so I love the sci-fi, I love the science, I love the fantasy. I've probably done more fantasy. I've just kind of gravitated to that, but I love a good sci-fi novel as well. Just trying to think of what my favorite was. It's hard to pin down a favorite.
That's fair. That's fair. You can't pick your favorite children.
Yeah, in the last few years, I've been focusing on fantasy almost exclusively, although I have several friends who write sci-fi, military sci-fi. So I like to read their stuff just to kind of keep up with it. But I've been writing, epic fantasy, epic young adult fantasy, historical fantasy, thrillers, and now, humorous fantasy. So that's kind of been my major focus in the last, 10 years. But I got to get around to writing a good, action-packed military sci-fi or something. That would be a blast.
Pun intended. So what was your first memory of engaging in speculative fiction? Was it because, there are the games, the movies, the TV shows, the books?
Yeah, for me, it was books. Growing up, my family didn't have a lot of access to a lot of TV and stuff. We kind of lived out in the woods in Maine, and reception was terrible. So for a while, we had like one channel, one TV channel. It was like, the public television and a bunch of VCR.
Yeah.
And that's all we had, for like several years. So my access to some of those other things was pretty severely limited as a kid. But we had books. We had a lot of books. So I dove into reading. Lord of the Rings, Hobbit were huge for me. And Shannara, those were big ones. The Sword and the sequels, those were big. And David Eddings, of course.
Yeah.
The Bulgarian.
Was it Bulgarian? Yeah.
Those are some of my all-time favorites. Love those books.
I love those.
And Raymond E.
He wrote some later in that. He wrote some of those later with his wife, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. She, he finally admitted near the end of the series that she had been working with him for years on those, and, helping him with the characters and the dialogue. Okay. And just love those books. Those were kind of major influences to my writing and my reading.
Yeah.
Then the Magician series with Raymond E. Feist, those were big. And of course, then as the Wheel of Time, got big, I read a bunch of those, and that was huge. That was awesome. So those played a big part of it. And then my friends and I, of course, we got into D&D and stuff, but we had kind of our twisted version of it. We pretty much played with just one dice and a lot of imagination. So it was a good time. We spent a lot of hours doing that. And that kind of helped hone my storytelling skills and, kind of help foster my love of writing and story and exploring worlds and characters, and all of that kind of together really helped push me on the road to wanting to get into this stuff. And So it's been great.
So what is it about the genre writ large of speculative fiction that pulls you in so much that you've essentially made it your life's work, not just with
Sure.
the writing, but as a fan? And what is it
Absolutely.
you love?
Well, that's a great question. For me, I love the scope. I love epic fantasy, exploring new worlds. Either as fantasy or, sci-fi does that too. Star Wars and Star Trek and Firefly, they get to different planets and different worlds, and fantasy does the same thing. And I really enjoy that. And just the concept of, magic and magical creatures and, different societies and that struggle of good versus evil. And, at heart, I'm an optimist. So I write these huge epic stories, but spoiler alert, in the end, generally my good guys are going to win. So if you like dark, twisted fantasy, you're probably not going to get that from me. I put in a lot of humor. My characters get beat up pretty bad, but eventually they're going to find a way because, that's what I love. Seeing, the good guys grow and develop and, defeat their inner demons so they can deal with their life's troubles. I think with fiction, we can explore some really intense topics. We can go into some stuff that's pretty deep and difficult, that sometimes is hard to talk about in real life without people getting all offended and get their defenses up. But in fiction, we can talk about it, we can explore it, and come up with some ideas and some solutions. And it's an emotional roller coaster. We can escape from reality, go through some difficulties, and eventually, get to a happy place, which I think can help deal with the things in life that are not always going to end in such a nice way. But those are a few things that kind of keep me motivated and interested and, endlessly fascinated with, the worlds of fantasy and storytelling and what we can do with our imagination.
Okay. So how did your love of speculative fiction transition from you being a fan, a reader, a consumer, into you deciding to write stories in that space?
That's a good question. And for me, it was a process, probably like everybody. As a teen, I was a huge reader. I get in trouble with my teachers regularly because I'd be hiding, my book under my desk, or I'd have my textbook open with my book inside. Kind of classic attempts that usually failed. And so I kept getting in trouble with that. But I loved living in those fantasy worlds and stuff. And as we got, like I said, we got into D&D some. So I started getting used to creating my own ideas and my own stories. And I'm one of the oldest of 11 siblings in my family. So I would often tell stories to my younger siblings. Being a storyteller is one of the things I do. And I tell stories to my kids as well, and really enjoy that. So that's one of the ways that got me going. And of course, I started writing some short fiction and some story ideas in high school, and came up with some initial ideas for, my first novels that, I started writing longhand, in notebooks. And unfortunately, those were lost after I graduated, but really enjoyed the process of starting to explore that story. In college, I got distracted by computers, like I said, and kind of forgot about writing for a long time until I rediscovered the kind of the burning need to write, and kind of my passion for it when my kids were young, and haven't been able to stop, haven't been looking back since.
Okay. So many authors will let their own real life stories influence the way they will let their own real life experiences influence the way they tell stories. So was there anything you think, like formidable moment, that sort of was that aha moment that you think shapes you as a storyteller? Was it telling the stories to your little siblings?
Yeah, that helped. And then by the time I started, telling stories again as an adult, I had gotten really into storytelling to my kids. We lived in Vermont at the time, and we lived out in the country. So it was 30 or 40 minutes to pretty much anywhere. And we get in the car and my kids would want stories. And we very quickly got beyond kind of the basic story ideas. They'd be like, "Dad, tell us a story. And my son, especially, was like 8 years old at the time. We'd get in the car and he'd be like, all right, Dad, we got 30 minutes, a warrior, an elf, and a necromancer, go. And so we just come up with a story on the fly that we had 30 minutes to tell. And that was really fun because it kind of helped, hone those storytelling instincts, I guess. And it's really cool when you're telling kids stories, you get that immediate feedback. If they laugh at your joke, you're on the right track. If they're all engaged, things are good. If they look at you like, Dad, what? You can change tracks. So they look at you like, Dad, that story was terrible. So you start learning what works and what doesn't, and figuring out that audience. And with my kids, how I got going, after writing that huge epic that I had to put aside for a while, I told my kids who were pretty young, I said, hey, let's come up with a really cool idea for magic, and then we can create stories using that magic. And they came back to me. My oldest daughter and son were like 11 and 9. And they said, okay, Dad, let's do rocks, just plain old rocks. I said, okay, that's cool. Let's do rocks. So tell me about rocks. And they went and they did like this huge term paper. It was like 20 pages of notes on rocks, different types of rocks and everything. And I was like, cool, we can work with this. So we came up with a magic system. We're all huge fans of Brandon Sanderson. So they're like, Dad, let's make a magic system, that's really specific, like one of his. So we designed it like that. And we started telling the story of George the Petrolist for like a year and exploring that world together. And then eventually I was like, I need to write this stuff down. And of course, now the main character's name is Connor. And the whole series is done with 7 main titles and 3 prequels and a book of short stories. But some of those initial ideas are still in there. And, that storytelling process became a big part of my writing process, just exploring ideas and seeing what would work and how to incorporate that into the plan.
Okay. So let's transition a little bit away from the writing side and talk about things from the fan angle. So have you gotten any cool fan art or had anybody cosplay your characters yet?
I haven't seen cosplay yet, unfortunately, but I have had some cool fan art. I had one young guy a couple years ago show up. He had written out some of the monsters, from the series, and, presented that to me, and that was super cool. I had another friend who came with me to one of the Comic-Cons to be my booth assistant. He's in college, and he's a really cool artist. And he decided to take the 4 main characters, several of the main characters in my Petrolist young adult fantasy series, and draw them out as if they were manga characters. And so
Nice.
that weekend of Comic-Con, he created these really cool, I'll have to share them with you, these really cool drawings of the characters of my book as if they were manga. And it was just cool to see his interpretation of the characters and kind of porting them over like that. I got a real kick out of that.
So this is April. This will air in April because we've got a Kickstarter. If you read the episode title, dear listener. So because of that, if they join your newsletter this month, is there any way you could include that art that was some of your characters turning the manga in your April-May newsletter? See, I can do calendars.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been sending out newsletters a little more regularly of late, just with Kickstarter updates and stuff. But that's a really cool idea, and I can definitely do that. I'll make a note right now.
And I will link to how they can join your newsletter in the show notes,
Sure.
And we'll go from there.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll include that. I think I might have a last year or so when he did it, but I'd be happy to do it again because it was really cool artwork, and it was really fun to see that happen.
Absolutely. So speaking of things in the fan side, has anybody asked for your autograph?
Oh yeah, and that's super fun. Of course, especially at Comic-Cons and stuff, when you're selling the books or when you're selling in person, it makes it great. Some people will buy books from my website, and when they do that, I'll sign them and do a note if they ask for a note and send that off to them. I was visiting one of the local schools once in the town where I live, and I've done a lot of school visits. And one of my friends who was in the school brought one of his friends over, and she was like an 8th grader or something. She was holding one of my books, and she was totally fangirling over meeting me, which was super funny because it was one of my first books. So I was like, nobody knows me, but she loved the book. I was her favorite author, and she was like all shy. She didn't want to come, like, oh, I met this author. So cute. I got such a kick out of that. And but there were tons of people around. I was talking with like 20 people, and she gave me her book and told me her name. So I wrote a little note to her, and I was super excited about that. And then my friend from the school, he forwarded me a message from her that she had posted on Facebook later that day, and she was like, "I met my favorite author today, and it was wonderful. And even though he spelled my name wrong, it was still great." It was like on a sword. It's like, felt so bad.
So, lesson learned: when you sign autographs, ask how they spell their name.
Yes. So now someone's like, "My name is Matt." I'm like, "So M-A-T-T." And they're like, "Yeah, traditional spelling." I'm like, "You have no idea. I am not going to make that mistake again." So,
Oh yeah,
some things you learn the hard way, I guess.
I was so excited. I told this story so the audience had heard it a billion times, but like the first time I got my someone asked for an autograph, I was so excited I spelled my own damn name wrong because I couldn't remember the cursive because I always wrote in print. Like I never used cursive even when we were learning it in school because I'm so much faster just writing traditional print.
Yeah.
That like the only thing I write cursive was my name. But when you sign your legal, even though everyone calls me JR, like you have to spell it out. So just it was a whole thing. I was laughing so hard. I ended up having to buy my own book just so I could give him one spelled right.
Oh, that's so
I probably
funny.
still have the first one I signed floating around somewhere with the misspelled name.
What a riot. Yeah,
But
I'm naturally left-handed, but trying to sign books left-handed is a major pain
oh
in the
yeah,
butt. Oh my gosh. So when I
do you tilt
started,
them like at an angle?
yeah. So when I first started, I realized that very quickly. Like the first time I tried to sign a book, I was like, no way. So I ended up teaching myself to write with my right hand, and I developed my author signature as a right-handed signature. So it's funny because sometimes when I'm writing a note, I'll just switch hands. I'll write some in one hand, then I'll write in another hand. When I'm signing books, I'll do it with my right hand and then sign it. And for a while, I was just painfully slow because it's like, just every line I had to think about because I was so bad at writing with that hand. But it was such a pain with the left hand. And besides, my handwriting is so bad left-handed, nobody could read it anyway. So I had to develop a whole new form of writing for myself so that I could sign books effectively. And, now I think I write better right-handed than left because I do it more often.
The other thing is no one ever thinks about is how much pressure you put when you write, which, if you're writing, you're scribbling your notes, whatever, not a big deal. When you're signing a book that costs, they're not cheap. If you write too hard, you tear through the page and that becomes a bit of an issue.
Right.
So yeah, it's all the things you never think about.
Right. And usually you're sitting there talking with them and you're trying to write and talk and then you want to sign with flair and you got to get it right every time where they're like, well, that signature sucks. And then you feel bad. Like you said, then you want to buy your own book and be like, let me do that one again.
Yeah. So have you ever spotted? Yeah. Have you ever spotted anybody out in public reading your books?
I have a few times locally, in the area where I live. I like to tease my wife. I'm like, yeah, they don't let me out much because, I work from home as a consultant, my computer stuff that I still do some, and I work from home as a writer. So I don't tend to just be out a ton in public unless I'm coming to conferences. Like right now, I'm in a hotel because I'm at a writing conference. I'm at NorWestCon in Seattle. So yay, I'm out of the house. So, hopefully I'll see some people reading one of my books this weekend, especially if I sell a few. So yeah, that's still kind of a rare thing for me because I'm not out a ton.
I think that's rare for most modern authors because so much of the book market has moved digital.
Yeah.
That I almost think the only time we really get affirmative answers on that one is either someone who is heavily involved in the con circuit or they've been around for a little bit before the ebooks revolutionized everything.
Yeah,
because that's when you get the most stories, I think. And if they're reading on their phone or their tablet and you want to see them reading it, it's kind of like you have to invade their privacy. And people get real finicky when you lean over their shoulder. Well, what you reading? It's
Right.
weird how that happens.
People get ticked when they take a magic marker or something or a Sharpie and start writing on their phone. They get all upset. They're like, the screen, I can't read. Well, you can.
So I've talked to two different authors who wrote code so they could sign books into the I guess the Mobi file or whatever. But then they did some updates, and now none of those programs work. So for a brief period, you could sign an ebook. Someone had come up with a way to do it.
I do actually have signed ebooks. You have to buy them through my website, or you can buy them from me, like at a convention. I have some codes where you can download it. But if you buy the ebook file from me, that file is different than the ones you buy online anywhere else because it has a signature page just built right into the file like an image. So when you start scrolling through, you'll see the title page and everything, and then you'll see the signature page as if I had just signed it with a pen, and then on into the book. So it's just like when you flip open a book, a paperback or something, you see that second page is signed. I have ebooks like that. So some people will, I'll see them at conventions and they're like, I want a signed book, but I only do ebooks. And that's okay. Buy the signed ebook. Totally fine.
Cool. So
that's how I got around that.
Nice. So speaking of fans, so what's the funniest or weirdest interaction with fans since you started writing?
That's a good question. I have one fan, one super fan in Germany, which is really fun because she'll give me updates sometimes. And, she's trying to spread the word for me out there in Germany. But she's read everything I've ever written. And that's just so awesome to chat with people like that. I chat with her on Messenger sometimes or through Facebook. And that's really cool. I had another woman start emailing me every typo she found in every book. Which is cool because I like seeing that, and then when I do my next update, I'll incorporate all those, into the files so that hopefully no one else will have to do that. But she would send it every book, kind of telling me her journey through the book and every typo she found, every question she had, just very interactive reading process. And then she got done through the series and, sent me a nice note. And she was like, this was great, Well, I think she gave the last book like 4 stars, even though it was like one of her favorite books. So the way people pick stars doesn't necessarily make sense. But I did have a great review this year. The last book in my Petulous series, somebody posted and they said, this series fulfilled every one of my fantasy book reading needs. It was like, boom, nailed it. So once in a while you get that, which is super encouraging. It helps you get through the people who write the review and they're like, this guy's a hack. It doesn't make any sense. Like, well, you can't please everybody.
No, you definitely cannot. And people don't always realize the purpose of the reviews. We even had a whole episode where we dove into the value of book reviews and the purpose of the reviews. Some of them, they seem to think they're talking directly to the author. And when an author's starting out, that can be true.
Yeah.
You used to be able to respond to reviews on Amazon, but it became flaming wars in too many books. So they sort of nixed that. You could put helpful or not, and that's it when someone writes a review. And you can report it, obviously, if it's meets whatever the guideline is.
Yeah,
but
they usually don't like to remove the trolls, though, unfortunately, even though they're obviously
really. Yeah, especially when you see reviews for books that are trashing it and the book's in pre-order, so there's no way they read it yet.
Right.
I've seen that.
It's like this book's been out for 1 hour and it's 1,000 pages long, and you're giving it a 1-star review. All right, yeah, that's totally legit.
Most of the time, though, people, I think, keep in mind you're writing reviews for other readers, telling them either why you liked it or why you hated it. And sometimes 1-star reviews sell a book to me, like, oh, too much violence and cussing. Oh, you don't say. Let me see if I'm not buying that one. You know what I mean? Like, but you're talking to other people like yourself, right? So,
right.
Anyway,
it's funny,
I'm big on the value of reviews.
A friend of mine is Matt Dinneman. He writes the Dungeon Crawler Carl books, Lit RPG. They're fantastic.
Okay, I've heard of them.
But he's gotten some really kind of wild 1-star reviews from people, and he's always like, ka-ching, I'm gonna just use this like in my next ad. Like one person was like, this book is not fit for good company or something ridiculous like that. And he was like, I'm going to use that review everywhere. I'm going to get so much mileage out of that, which is a great way to look at it.
I actually did that once, and then Amazon put the kibosh on it because
Oh, no.
you're not supposed to be able to do that. But then in the Great Purge, when they so many of the reviews disappears, that one disappeared too. But it was like, this is what happens when a 12-year-old with ADHD writes gun porn, and I'm like, dude, you couldn't have written me better ad copy.
That's awesome.
It was Mill Sci-Fi, so I'm
That's
like, I'm going to use that until Amazon was like, no, we don't do that here. So. All right, before we dive into the book and the commercial, can you tell us everything you've written? So sort of the Reader's Digest version of your body of works?
Sure. The ones I have published right now are the Petrolus series, which is my young adult epic fantasy. That's a big epic adventure, over 7 main titles in the series. Starts with a book called Set in Stone. There's a lot of humor and a really cool magic system based on rocks. I talked about that a little bit. Kind of a Brandon Sanderson-esque magic system with kind of very rules-based, specific, almost scientific type magic system. That one's got 7 main titles, 3 prequels, and a book of short stories. It's totally done. That's been my most popular work so far. I have the Face Takers, which is my urban fantasy thrillers. Those haven't been found as much, unfortunately, because when people find them, they really love them. And I had so much fun writing those books. They're a fast action story that starts in the near future and goes progressively back into history as these people are jumping in and out of memories of some people who have been living for thousands of years and fighting over important moments in time. So that one, if you like a lot of action, a lot of guns, some cool monsters, a little bit of romance, kind of all mixed together and set to boiling, that's a great series, The Face Takers. And that series is done in 4 books. And then now the Bacon Master of the Apocalypse, my humorous epic fantasy is, I've got the Kickstarter running right now and getting ready to release that one. And I plan to have several books in that series. The first trilogy I'm working on finishing right now. And then I've got a few things I haven't released and, a bunch of short stories that have been out there in various places. But that's about it so far.
Okay. Well, all of that sounds fascinating. But before we dig into the book that brought us here, we are going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man.
Do you like your science fiction with a little bit of naughty and a good helping of comedy? Then pick up your copy of Flux Runners by William Joseph Roberts and join the crew of the Betty in their adventure into the dark unknown. Flux Runners is available through Three Ravens Publishing on Amazon in ebook, paperback, hardback, and on Audible, narrated by Brian Stansberry.
Wow, I really got to adjust the volume on that one. Sorry about that, people. But it's an interesting book. We've had him on to talk about it, so you should check it out, people. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. But let's not dally too much because, time is money, as they say. Let's talk about Bacon Master of the Apocalypse. So where did you get the idea or the premise for this universe? Psychedelics, Ouija board, too much mountain air?
Oh, my gosh. It was just kind of a process, really. With the Petrolus books, we had some characters that's kind of started as really kind of funny sidekick characters that had really cool character arcs throughout. There's one character in particular who was all about food, and he's a very funny guy, and he's ended up being one of the all-time favorite characters for a lot of the fans. And so when I was after I finished the series, I was thinking about what else to do next. In talking about it with family and friends and some other folks, we kept coming back to the fact that some of the stuff I do really well is humor, and then stuff with food, because a lot of my characters end up being really all about the food. So then I was thinking about this one character. His name is Hamish. He's so funny, but I was like, why don't we take Hamish and just kind of push that to the limits and see how far we can get. So let's do a world. I think it was late one night. I was talking with my older son, who's now in his early 20s, great idea guy. And we were talking about it, came up with the idea of let's do something with food. Okay, how about food magic? So all right, we're going to do food magic, culinary wizards. We started exploring it. And we're bacon fans. And so we're like, okay.
Who isn't?
So we're like, we got to have a bacon master. As soon as that came out, it was like, boom, the ideas just started firing like crazy. And so we got to have a bacon master. And then what else? Okay, we got cheese wizards, and we got muffin mages, and we got vegetable shamans and milk mages. And they just started all coming out. And then we just figured out, okay, how do we put that into book form? This one definitely started with the idea of, humorous food magic as the catalyst of everything we do. And eventually I settled on the main character. His name is Rasher Dilskin, and he's a bacon master. He has the ability to channel the awesomeness of bacon for superhuman enhancements. But he faints at the sight of blood. So he's got a bit of a challenge there. And he's trying to figure that out. And, figure out how to get his career going and, win permission to marry his true love, who's a noble woman, without, fainting at the wrong moment because he sees somebody bleeding. He's a paint battle trainer in the legions who help fight off the apocalypse. So super fun. That was kind of how we got started with that whole thing and just developing the world. And when we were talking about different titles and stuff, at first I was like, okay, I started, my working title was Almost Heroes, because with all these guys with really, really cool abilities, but they all have kind of major problems. So there's Rasher, who's got the amazing bacon powers, but he faints at the sight of blood, which is a big deal. There's a girl who ends up on his team named Kuchiza, and she's a meat mage. She can create these meats that can produce superhuman enhancements for folks that are based on the animals that the meats come from. But she's from a family that's got a lot of issues, so she's only ever been allowed to work with chicken. So she can produce all these chicken-based enhancements that are really cool. But chicken isn't really something you consider as super epic warrior material, so she's got to figure that out. We have a dwarven coffee wizard who gets to shake so bad he can't work with metal. He can only work with origami when he's trying to craft things. We have an epic knight who fights with a shovel, so we got a shovel knight on board. We've got a spice wizard who is an overweight gastrointestinal expert. So all these guys aren't exactly hero material, but they end up in this world. The apocalypse has been prophesied. The empire is going to be destroyed by apocalypse, but the leadership of the empire didn't like that idea, so they fired the prophet, hired a PR firm to give him better prophecies, and they created a team of heroes known as the Reapers of the Apocalypse, who lead the legions to fight off the apocalypse when it comes in every generation. And they've been successful for 11 generations. But now the empire is being invaded by these hordes of magical monsters, and the current Reaper team are abruptly sidelined by nefarious contract addendums that say you can no longer be heroes on penalty of the cream cheese clause. So it's pretty intense. And they need new heroes, and what they end up getting is Rasher Dilskin and his team that nobody believes can really save breakfast, let alone the Empire. So in Bacon Master of the Apocalypse, all this starts getting set up, and they have to figure out how to work together and solve a mystery and figure out how to rally the Legion so they can go out to battle against the ravening hordes of monsters with their battle cuisine and save the day. So it's actually very epic. The first draft I started working on it, it started coming out as so epic that we lost some of the humor in there. So I had to dial it back and be like, okay, this is a different kind of story. This is humorous fantasy, not epic fantasy with some humor. So I had to go back and dial up the humor elements. But it is very much an epic book, and I think people are really, really going to love it. The magic system is hilarious. You go into battle, and you've got, muffin mages with burning muffins that they're throwing, and cheese wizards with acids and poisons. You got milk mages with healing whipped cream. And there's a great scene. There's a battle on a wall, and they're trying to fight these monsters and stuff. And you get some vegetable shamans up there. They're grilling up some vegetables on the wall. Like, just a minute, it's almost ready. And then they throw the vegetables over the wall, and it creates this huge, earth explosion and stuff. But it's just a lot of inherent humor in there. And I think it's going to be great. I think people are really going to love it.
So before we get too deep into it, I went ahead and threw your ad from your Kickstarter on the screen so people can see the art you commissioned. But what would the age range for this story be? It sounds like almost this is written for any age range, but what would you say?
Well, I'm writing it. It's technically adult humorous fantasy. Um, I don't plan to write a lot of racy stuff that would kind of limit the age range. So there's some romance in there. There's battle in there. There's a lot of epic stuff, but there's a lot of humor, and so you could have teens read it or adults read it. If people are fans of Terry Pratchett, or if they're fans of The Princess Bride, and if they like bacon, some good food, they would love these books. So I think that's really the target audience, or the best audience, are people who like things like Terry Pratchett and The Princess Bride, all rolled into some awesome food fantasy, food humor, and culinary wizards that all have these different powers. We've got the gods of the Pantheon in this world that empower their guilds of magic with different abilities. And so, yeah, it's a good time.
So what you're saying is they'll have fun storming the castle?
Absolutely. It would take a miracle.
So now
they need a miracle.
So now into the fun part. Can we take a moment? Is this what the cover is going to look like? Because there was another cover that looked like it was leather bound.
Yeah, this is the standard cover that all the standard editions will have. And the artist is a fantastically talented guy from down in Argentina, Luciano Fleitas, and he's done some covers for some other authors. He did the covers for the Dungeon Crawler books for Matt Dinneman. That's how I kind of became aware of him. So he did this amazing cover for me. The leather edition one that I sent to you is the exclusive Kickstarter edition. As part of the Kickstarter, we're going to be creating this really epic leather hardcover that people won't be able to get anywhere else, just through the Kickstarter. I'm very excited about it. The printer, I think I'm pushing them kind of to the limits because there's they're doing the foil stamping and the embossing and the debossing, and there's all kinds of stuff going on with this cover. I'm very excited about it. And
all right, well, let me go ahead,
go ahead.
Since we mentioned it, give me a second and I will go ahead
and
show. This is the embossed leather cover, which I think is amazing.
It's funny because we developed that logo for the Reapers of the Apocalypse, that butcher knife there on the shield. And I asked my artist, I was like, hey, could you, take this logo and incorporate it into this, as well as the title of the book, incorporate it into this, kind of greenish leather hardcover blank that the printer sent me, kind of as a base. And he came back with this, and he was like, is this what you mean? I was like, absolutely, dude, that's amazing. So I sent that back to the printer, and I was like, yeah, this is what I plan to do with it. And they're like, whoa, yeah, let me get back to you for a bit. And they came back to me, and they said, yeah, we kind of looked it over and talked it over with our art department and everything. And they said, yes, we can do this. So I hope they can pull it off, because it's going to be very epic.
Absolutely. So speaking of reward tiers and only from Kickstarters, so normally we talk about books. They're just directly for sale from Amazon or Barnes & Noble or wherever you buy your books. But you're doing it through Kickstarter, which we haven't had as many authors come through here, although it happens. Kickstarters are, as you know, dear listener, they're time sensitive. So sometimes scheduling those interviews is just hit or miss. Mm-hmm. But what made you decide to go with Kickstarter, and what reward tiers did you pick? Because obviously they're getting the book, but generally there's and more.
Sure.
So what can you tell us about your Kickstarter? And we'll link to that in the show notes, dear listener.
Yeah, that's a great question. I could have just, thrown the book out there. People love the concept, and I think it will be a very popular book. But I've seen some people do some fun things with Kickstarter, and I thought, that would be a blast. And I really want to make this leather hardcover edition. I think that would be super cool, especially with this book. And the only way I can really do that effectively is through the Kickstarter because, these are custom ordered. So I have to order a certain number of them. So I can't just throw it up there on Amazon unless I want to go order, 1,000 of these and have them sitting in my, my garage. And it's not really a great way to do it. So the Kickstarter is a way to try to get the word out and, gauge interest and, make it available. The different levels, kind of the level that's been the most popular is the Bacon Master level. And that's the $100 level where you get the leather hardcover, you get the audiobook, you get the ebook, and you get some digital artwork. And we're hoping to throw in some additional things if we can, unlock some, some of the stretch goals. So that's kind of the main backer level that most people are going for, because you kind of get it all. You get the ebook, the audiobook, the special leather hardcover. But there's different levels where you can get, just the audiobook or just the ebook or just the standard hardcover, or combinations of those things. And there's a couple other high tier levels that are really fun that we threw in there just to make it a blast, and just explore different things. There's a level called the Gods of the Pantreon where you can get everything in the Bacon Master level, but also, include your favorite food that I can then take and incorporate into the powers of one of the gods of the Pantreon. And that was a little bit more expensive, but hopefully someone will pick it up because that would be fun to do. So yeah, we're trying to create a range of different backing levels for different interest levels and different budgets for people, and trying to have fun with it. We added a lot of, add-ons that people can go for, from, a set of Bacon Master cookie cutters, to an apron, to a full-size, skillet frying pan, cast iron pan with the Bacon Master logo and, someone's name engraved.
Ooh, I like it.
That was going to be super cool. To some shovel-shaped letter openers, to just all kinds of different things we did just to have fun with it. So I hope people are liking it.
What level of backing do they have to give you for you to drive to their house and cook them bacon?
Yes, that is called the Master Chef level. That one is like $6,800, and I will fly or drive, however it takes me to get there. My wife and I will come to your house. We will cook epic food with you and spend the afternoon talking about the book or anything else you want to talk about.
Outstanding. That had to be an option given the subject.
Yeah, so it's going to be good. That would be amazing if someone picked that up. I don't know how much we'd actually make off of that, because we'd probably spend all the money in travel and just buying a ton of food, which would be super fun. I mean, what a blast that would be. So we threw a lot of those things in there just to try to have fun with it.
So does this mean that when you cook bacon, you can call it a tax write-off now? Absolutely. I need to get on this train if that's how it's working. Man, yeah, I messed up. I didn't steal this idea sooner.
We've been buying a lot of bacon and trying a lot of recipes. And people have started sending me their favorite bacon recipes, which is awesome, because there are some very creative chefs out there that I really appreciate, because I wouldn't come up with some of these things myself. But one thing I did recently was we took some bacon and we kind of half cooked it and then wrapped it around cheese sticks, like string cheese sticks. And then we baked it in the oven for like 20 minutes, just so that the cheese could start melting. And by that time, the bacon's all cooked and you take it out, you get these cheesy bacon sticks that you can eat. And those are wonderful snacks. They turned out excellent.
So let's talk about the book itself. What would the 30-second elevator pitch for Bacon Master of the Apocalypse be?
Awesome.
I mean, I almost feel like the name is enough.
Yeah, a lot of people, they see the name and they're like, I'm sold. But I kind of touched on some of that earlier. The basic pitch is, just going to get my mind straight again. Talking about bacon, get me distracted. So Bacon Master of the Apocalypse. Me too. Yes, this is humorous fantasy set in a world where magic comes from food. You get the gods of the Pantreon out there, powering their guilds of magic. with different powers, the cheese wizards, the muffin mages, the bacon masters. But the story is about Rasher Dilskin. He's a bacon master who can channel the awesomeness of bacon for superhuman enhancements. He's a super boss warrior, but he faints at the sight of blood, which is kind of a problem because the Empire is being invaded by these hordes of ravening monsters. And the heroes who lead the legions to fight off the apocalypse, known as the Reapers of the Apocalypse, are sidelined by nefarious contract addendums, and the Empire needs new legion or new Reapers. So they get Rasher, and he's given a quirky little team that have their own issues, and nobody believes they can save breakfast, let alone the Empire. So they got to figure out how to work together, whip up some new recipes, get their battle cuisine in array, and prepare to lead the legions out to fight off the hordes of monsters.
Okay, so what is it you think that? Well, first off, is this book going to be part of a series or is it a standalone?
It will be part of a series. I'm wrapping up final edits right now. I've got book 2, the first draft, written, and it's an awesome book. Book 3 is planned out, so it's going to be like an initial trilogy that may be an initial 4 or 5 books. Still kind of figuring out the ending of that first bit of the series, and then there's additional books I may add on to the end of that as well, just kind of depending on how well it goes. And people seem to really love the concept, so I think there could be easily 10 books in the series as we roll through this one.
Okay, so what is it you think that makes this book and then the series that follows it, that will follow it, special?
Well, the food humor, culinary wizards. I think it's just something that a lot of people can relate to. People like food, and food makes us happy. It brings us to good places a lot of times, and a lot of our happy memories and kind of powerful memories are associated with food. And you smell a certain food and boom, you can be transported. So I'm hoping to tap into that and just give people a really fun epic adventure that they can just enjoy, probably while they're binge eating all their favorite desserts. So if we can hit that, it's going to be awesome. And I just hope people can read this and just laugh and enjoy it and turn around and say, I need to go start cooking something, or bake, 500 cookies and dip it in ice cream and, just have a good time.
Absolutely. So it sounds like a little bit of a unique premise. So did you hit on any of the common fantasy tropes when you wrote this? And if so, can you give us some examples?
Yeah, it is a pretty unique book, but I think having kind of that quirky team that the underdogs trying to save the day is a trope that's fairly common. Having the hero who's trying to win the hand of his true love despite overwhelming opposition and long odds is a fairly common trope. But I think I've given him a pretty unique twist. The world of Bacon Master, the Empire is that kind of runs half the world. Excuse me, is it's a group of multiple different nations, and there's a lot of politics and internal strife and struggle, and we may be looking at the fact that there may be a time when the apocalypse really needs to happen. There may need to be some change. But we'll have to see. Maybe they can help change things from the inside without things having to collapse and burn it all down. But it's kind of like think the Roman Empire at its height. If it was based on food and food magic. There's some great things.
Well, I mean,
things and there's
garum was a thing.
What's that?
The Romans loved, was it garum, I think, or it's like the fish guts juice that they put on everything.
Oh yeah,
I just can't pronounce the Latin.
I have been doing food research, and if anyone knows like really disgusting foods, like there's the god of disgusting foods, and that's kind of one of the things they have to deal with. But there's some pretty gross foods out there. You look at like Scandinavia, some of the stuff those people had to eat just to survive. Now they're called, delicacies or, national traditions, but it's like, people ate that because they were starving and they're like, what can we do here? And some of the stuff they came up with, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm definitely gonna have to fit that in there somewhere. But great food too. A lot of desserts. You get the confectioners with addictive sugars. So, instead of having like, the heroin addicts and stuff, you get the sugar addicts, looking for their daily fix, and stuff like that.
I feel attacked.
It's just going to be awesome. So, yeah, this empire is pretty amazing. There's a lot of good things, but there's issues too. There's countries that have been conquered, and discrimination they're dealing with, and other things I think people will relate to, and then root for our heroes to hopefully help resolve some of the bigger issues. Other than just kill that monster. Those monsters that are invading. There's other monsters already kind of in the gates that they might have to deal with. So that's going to be fun to explore and kind of weave into the story. And between feasts and amazing food magic, they're going to have to deal with some pretty heavy stuff. So it should be a good time.
So you've talked about the tropes. This is obviously a fantasy novel. Did you put this in any other subgenres, or is it pretty strictly, you think, fantasy?
Well, it's definitely fantasy. If people want to look at it as a humor novel, that would work too. But it's definitely going to fit in the fantasy category, just the way it's set up, and kind of just the progression of the story arc and stuff is definitely going to be similar to a classic epic fantasy, but a little more lighthearted than some stuff you might find out there, and a lot more humor, hopefully. A lot of food puns. I got one character who's every time he gets nervous and stuff, which is often, he just tells dad jokes. So we get a lot of dad jokes and food puns and food humor. So there should be some humor for pretty much every taste that people may have for what they like in humor there.
Okay. So you've told us about the main characters with the party. Were there any secondary characters that you thought were especially memorable? And if so, can you tell us about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's kind of one of the leaders of this horde of monsters. I thought he was going to be appearing in book 1, but you're not really going to see him in book 2. You'll hear about him a little bit, but he's a really interesting character, and I've been getting on the Midjourney AI art generation program to create some artwork for some of the stuff in the world, to kind of flesh out some of the world. And I created a really cool image of this guy. He's like based on a Scottish death fairy, super kind of freaky, crazy monster dude, but he's really fascinating. But he's going to be fun to bring out there. Our main hero, Rasher, his girlfriend, Kitan is her name, and she's a very interesting character. She's a high noble woman, young. She's from a family with a lot of ambitions to join kind of the highest tier of families. So you have 6 tiers of nobility, all trying to get to the top tier, the preemie tier. So the different tiers are kind of named after the kind of classic food courses. Like if you get a 10-course meal or something, you get the preemie and the secondi and the contorni levels and stuff. So that's the names of the different high nobility. And then the prophet of the goddess of apocalypse, or the goddess of prophecy. He's a really funny kind of crazy old man who's got an eye into the future there. So we'll see him a few times as well, and he's turning out to be just really interesting.
So other than the monsters that are sort of attacking the Empire, are there any other bad guys that the heroes have to confront?
There are. Actually, in book 1, we don't actually see a ton of the monsters, because the main character, all this stuff's happening in book 1. They're in the capital, so they hear about the invasion and they start getting attacked, but they're getting attacked more from some of the traders within the Empire, and some of the monsters and kind of some of their allies who have snuck into the capital to create problems to keep their legions from getting out to assist the outskirts. So in book one, you know, as they kind of are being called or appointed to this Reaper team, they're dealing with a lot of internal strife. And there's kind of the main bad guys are more internal problems. There are some monsters they got to deal with and some of that, but they also have to deal with some people who are trying to undermine their work and kind of attack the legions kind of in their home base before they can even get started. So book one's dealing with some of that mystery, you know, as they're trying to get their feet under them, you know, things are blowing up and, you know, food's getting stolen and disappearing, and you know some of their supplies are being used against them. Some of their battle cuisine is being used against them and stuff like that. So they're having to scramble to deal with all that and figure out who the traitors and the internal enemies are. Just so they got to deal with that, just so they can then get the legions to start marching, so they can deal with the armies of the hordes. More in book two. So book one's going to be really interesting, where there's a lot more mystery and internal strife and politics and stuff that they're dealing with, in addition to some of the monsters. So it should give a pretty good insight into some of the complexities of this world. The legions are just like, we just want to go fight monsters, and that's not always an easy thing to do, just because they get in their own way.
Okay. So speaking of characters, it sounds like you did a lot of not so nice things to them. All authors do. But if they met you in a back alley and they knew who you were Frank Morin, the god of their world, the destroyer of everything they held dear. How do you see that interaction playing out?
I think some of them would be kind of ticked. You look at Rasher, he's got a lot going for him, but he's got this blood phobia thing where he because he's a pretty boss warrior. Bacon Masters usually have it pretty easy because they have all these powers and stuff, but that's really crippling, and it's threatening to destroy his career and his chances of marrying his girlfriend, and just it threatens all kinds of stuff. So he might not be super happy with some of the choices we made, but hopefully once he gets through some of the character development that I'm hoping will happen, he won't be so upset. A couple of the other characters may not be exactly happy, but like our dwarven coffee wizard, he's just an enthusiastic guy. He's just excited about everything. He gets out of the mines, gets to see the world, enjoy some good coffee, and create a lot of cool origami. He would be fun to meet, anywhere, back alley or elsewhere. And the Shovel Knight doesn't have any magical powers at first, and may or may not change that, but he's a pretty amazing guy, but he sees the world a little differently than most of us. He would be really fun to meet in person, just because he starts talking and sometimes you're like, what? Where are you going with that? And then he'll come to a conclusion and you're like, wow, that's interesting. But then he comes up with stuff that's really deep, and it kind of makes you question some of the assumptions that you make. But he'd be really fun to meet in person. Plus his shovel is totally epic. So kind of a shout out to the classic Shovel Knight game, I think.
So what can you tell us about the universe? Is there anything you haven't told us yet that you think would illuminate the worlds where the story is taking place?
Yeah, I could talk about it all day. Depends how many spoilers you want, I guess. But it's really
we try to keep it spoiler free because we want people to read it.
Yeah. So I won't tell you the specifics about, the challenges that Rasher and his team are dealing with, but, the world is really cool because, book one it's mostly set in the capital city, which has been the capital of this, constantly growing empire that has conquered multiple vassal nations, for 12 generations. So, they've got all this cool magical stuff that's going on, and the city is a wonder, it's a wonder of the world. Even though our main characters are in kind of the military compound called the Acropolis, but they don't get to see as much of that all the time. But, there's 6 layers of different nobility, all kind of with all this internal intrigue and politics and stuff. But the most powerful of the nobility, the powerful families, they sit in the food court, which is like their Congress, and they meet with the imperial chef to, create laws and everything. And each of these families are the patrons of one of the guilds of magic. So they're affiliated with the different guilds of magic. So if a family, one of the lower tier families, manages to unseat, to topple a higher family, economically or whatever, then they either can take over that guild of magic, or they might topple that guild of magic and, promote their own lesser god tied to their guild of magic, which would possibly have ramifications in the pantheon of gods that could be very disruptive. They haven't had changes in the pantheon for a long time, and some people have forgotten that's even possible, but it could happen. And there's a lot of the lesser gods out there that would love to see a shakeup in the pantheon seats. So there's kind of intrigue among the gods, and there's intrigue among the high houses, and Rasher's kind of stuck in the middle, and he's just like, dude, I just want to do my job and marry my girlfriend, and life's not going to be that simple for him.
So obviously the magic in this world is a known thing, and you have the gods. How involved are the gods in the daily life in this world, and do we see any of it from their point of view? Because that's, some of the dividing lines you see in fantasy are the role of the gods and then the role of them with you as the reader. Like, do you see their head from their POV, etc.?
Yeah, I don't have the gods like their POV in book one, but it's a great question, and it's possible we could add that in the future. They're not necessarily, taking a direct, like they don't appear to people, normally and stuff like that, but they're granting their powers to people on a daily basis. And, one of the cool things about this world, like you can see in the picture you put up there, Rasher's got kind of this big crazy hat on. And if you look really close, it's got like bacon in the brim. But in this world, hats are very important, and especially for the nobility, they've got these enormous, crazy hats. That's the style right now, because for them, it's a religious thing. So think like a Kentucky Derby hat, like on steroids. Some of them are multi-layered, and it's super fun. But like when they're eating, like they'll take off their hat and they'll put like their first bite of food in their hat, and it'll kind of dissolve, and that's like their offering to their gods, their food offering daily. But some of the gods don't necessarily get along, and so some of them are starting to pull some strings and move people into positions that can benefit some of the games that they're playing. And as we get into book 2 and 3, some of the kind of the established magical powers, there's going to be some new things showing up that they don't usually see, some things that are not normally possible because the gods don't usually play nice together and combine magics and stuff. But there are higher levels of magic that they may be able to get to if some of the gods are willing to work together to accomplish their goals. So that's one of the things our characters are going to start trying to figure out and learn about. And but the higher they get into that, the deeper they get drawn into the intrigue of the gods and the high houses, which is it's high stakes stuff. And getting killed is probably not the worst thing that could happen to them.
So when you wrote all of these food metaphors and the food magics and stuff, did you test it all out yourself or just some of it?
Did I do what?
Test out all the foods you were mentioning yourself?
I'm trying to test as much as I can. We've been having fun cooking a lot of stuff. And I've been asking people for their favorite recipes and favorite foods. And I'm always happy to receive, recipe links and recipe ideas and food puns from folks, trying to incorporate as much as I can. And, but yeah, some of the food is hard to test out, like muffin mages, they have like some fire elemental magic. So they have like burning muffins and exploding cakes and illumination pastries and some other things like that. So we love making cookies and muffins and stuff at the house, and cooking bacon and steaks and ribs. And we've been doing a lot of that and just trying to figure out how to tie it all into the book. And it's just something that I think we're going to enjoy doing for through the whole process.
I can already see your IRS agent looking at your tax deduction. Like they say, what? They did what? This isn't a restaurant. Let me look closer.
Right. Yeah, that may happen. I haven't been expensing a ton of the food stuff yet, but that's going to be happening more and more. Historically, I've done a lot of travel for some of my books, especially the face taker ones. Like we went to Egypt and China and Italy and Constantinople and stuff, going to these different places that the characters go. So I got to expense a lot of travel, which has been awesome. But then I just got back from Italy again with the family, and my trip, I was doing a lot of research into Roman cuisine and architecture and history and stuff that I can hopefully add into some of the stuff I had planned for this capital city. But yeah, I need to start looking at my food budget and figuring out how to expense more of that, because doing cooking research is gonna be a big part of this year, I think.
Yeah.
It also means I'm going to have to invest in some more running shoes, I think, because, at this rate.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. You're going to, I'm just sitting here like I'm trying to get my health back together and lose the weight that I put on when I got hurt. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking, man, I didn't eat lunch before this or dinner before this interview because my walk took longer than tonight. Uh-huh. And I'm like, man, now I'm getting hungry. I got to be careful because this is the kind of thing that's like you fall off the wagon. So I can't imagine your family. They're like, no, not more sugar. Okay, if you twist my arm.
Yeah, we've been trying to cut back a little bit, but then I start writing, and it's just like, I'm sure when people read it, it's going to be similar. I get up and I'm like, all right, I need a cookie and I need a muffin and I need a platter full of bacon. And in my office, I have my workstation. Actually, my desk has two workstations on it. One of them I keep my laptop in is a seated station. The other one, I have an adjustable desk where I can lift it up, and I have a treadmill I can fit under the desk. So some days I stand there. It's my standing workstation. I turn the treadmill on, and I can go about 4 miles an hour, and I just walk while I type. And I need to build that back up. Yesterday I did like 7 miles, I think. But I've done like 20 miles in a day just walking on the treadmill while I type and work. So it's a great way to burn a few calories when I can't leave the desk.
How do you do, like, I don't know. That seems like it would be a difficult way to work on those. I've seen people do it in the videos, but from a practical sense, it just looks more like it's
Actually, once I get in the zone and I'm typing and stuff, it doesn't really bother me, because for my last several books, when I'm writing new chapters, like the first draft and stuff, my preferred way to work is to grab my voice recorder and my kind of like a headphones, mic, and I'll go hike on trails for 4 hours and, hike 10 miles on some trails near my house, and I'll dictate several chapters. So walking and talking or walking and working has become kind of a common thing for me. And so for me, it hasn't been a big deal. Although I got my wife on the treadmill when I first got it, and she did it for like 10 minutes or something. She was playing around the computer, and then she just stopped. Like she forgot she was walking, and she like fell off the back of the treadmill. Luckily, I managed to catch her, and she managed to not fall. But that could have been bad. And it's like you can't forget that you're walking, because the machine will just throw you right across the room. So yeah, there's some dangers you gotta kind of keep aware of. But it's been working for me.
So I do the walking and talking for my walks too, so I get it. But then I just plug it into the Dragon program, and it transcribes it. And luckily for the readers, it takes out all the heavy breathing, so it doesn't sound as obscene when it translates it to text for me.
Absolutely.
So, for some fun questions about your world before we wrap this up. So, would you live in this world if you could?
That's a great question. I think I would. Some worlds, like in some of my favorite stories that I've read, I've thought about that. It's like, I wouldn't live in that world because like everything is just bad. But in this world, I would, because, especially there in the capital, it's such a magical place. It's all based on food magic, food stuff, but it's super cool. Like there's streets of moving water that people can ride on, instead of, their commute. They can just, jump on a boat, on these, and they'll the roads of water will just flow uphill and take them to their next place. And there's just so much cool stuff out there in the world, and the food and everything. It'd be so fun to live in that world, as long as you're not like where the ravening hordes of monsters are attacking. It's
plot armor depending.
Yes, plot armor depending. It would be as long as the capital doesn't end up burning down in a giant exploding cake, inferno. It would be a really cool place to live and to visit.
Okay. So of all the magic that you invented in this universe, of all the food magic, which one would you want for your daily use?
Great question. What a good question. Of course, I would probably lean toward, being a bacon master, just because I love bacon, and it's been so fun getting into
Who doesn't?
into Rasher's life, because he can channel bacon depending on how much bacon he has accessible and how much he kind of uses at once, releases into his system at once, because he can eat the bacon and store it inside of him like a fuel ready to go. It can enhance pretty much all of his physical and mental attributes. Like chewy bacon is better for mental stuff, crispy bacon is better for physical stuff, and then there's higher forms of bacon power. If you have enough bacon on hand that you can use once in a while, and that would just be really fun. Being a bacon master is pretty awesome, but some of the other ones are cool too. Like the meat mages, they can take meats from different animals and produce some really cool enhancements that, end up being permanent, enhancements that people have, but it takes a while to produce those. Milk mages are healers. So, they have their healing whipped cream and trauma yogurt and stuff. That would be really cool. If you want to be a doctor or something, be a milk mage, because they can do some pretty miraculous stuff. But confectioners are cool. With their cookies and stuff. I love cookies. That's like Christmas cookie time. And they can do all kinds of really cool enhancements with cookies. Like couriers, have like cookie sugar enhanced speed and things like that. But their sugars can be pretty addictive and troubling too. So you got to be careful with that. But yeah, I'd probably be a bacon master, just because they're awesome. And
Bacon.
Of course, you wrote it that way because Bacon Master is kind of the main character, so it's got to be cool.
So did you watch that, was it movie Elf, the Every Christmas then, by the guy with the cookies? Is that basically what your when he goes crazy, is that what your sugar masters are like, basically?
Yeah, they can be pretty insidious, but with their, they've got different cookies that can do kind of give you a temporary boost to energy or speed or things like that. They can produce hallucinations. They can do all kinds of stuff with their sugars. Powdered sugar can be pretty addicting, but yeah, I love a good cookie. So at Christmas time, we make lots of cookies, and I try not to eat as many as I want to, but it's hard. So I'd be tempted to be a confectioner, just because then I'd have to bake cookies and cookies and other sweets every single day, which would be awesome.
Yep, that sounds fun. So when go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing that I hadn't brought up, but you got the different guilds of magic with their different abilities, but then you have the chefs, because they can take foods that have been prepared by the different guilds of magic, and they're the keepers of the recipe books. So they can help, produce these amazing feasts, these meals that can then boost, one power. You might have a bunch of different ingredients in a recipe, but they can boost one effect out of that. And so when you're starting into the higher recipes, higher tiered recipe, you can do some pretty incredible things. And those are going to be fun for people to see in the book.
Okay. So your universe obviously has monsters in it, because you mentioned that. So when you created these monsters, how did you go about doing it? Did you let your nightmares inspire you? Did you let Mother Nature? Did you pull on the myths, legends, and lore from across the globe?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of all of the above. I ended up kind of zeroing in on like Scottish myths. Like the main bad guy, one of the main bad guys we've seen in the first couple of books is based on a Scottish death fairy known as a Bean Nye, just because the name is awesome. And I changed it a little bit to kind of fit the world, but he's a pretty scary dude. And then, we have kind of a bunch of different kind of humanoid type monsters that are all kind of grouped under the term of goblins. And you've got different types of rock trolls. And then you have all kinds of these different fae type creatures that have different types of magic. And, there's quite a wide variety of magical monsters that they kind of have their own country, their own part of the continent, these dark forests that they live in, but they have their own internal issues. You've got kind of like in normal fae or fairy tale, you get kind of the good and the evil courts of magic. Of course, for them, it's the bitter court and the savory court that don't always get along. But for this invasion, they're trying to work together, for at least on the surface. But then you've got, the politics between the different countries and the different levels of nobility. And then there's at least one other, external confederation of other nations are trying to fight against the empire. So you've got several different layers of conflict we're going to need to explore as we kind of get into the deeper magic and the wider world. So I'm looking forward to getting to that.
Okay. So with the speaking of the wider world, we obviously met, the interview's winding down. We're at almost an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
But was there anything about it's been fun. Was there anything about this universe that we didn't think to ask that you want to tell us before we wrap this up?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so many things that we could talk about. It's been really fun, building and exploring this world. And, it's one of those things that is still growing. And, every other day it seems I have another aha moment. Like, oh, we got to do this other thing. But I just had a couple of cool maps made. I got them back this week and plan to be sharing those with the newsletter and fans and stuff, kind of what they know of the known world and kind of the main city that a lot of this action is taking place in. So I'm a map guy. I love doing maps. And so I hope to have several here before we're done.
Okay. So this is the part yet again in this interview, dear listener, where I remind you that your reviews matter. So please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platform. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book. So do your part. And legend has it, when this book goes live and you write the 100th review, the Bacon Fairy will show up and deliver Frank some fresh stuff for while he writes book 2.
Absolutely. Yeah. That'll be a good day.
So will you share with your family, or is it all going to be yours?
Well, we'll see. I got to share with my wife because I got to keep all that happy. But yeah, we only got one of our kids still at home. The other 3 are all off in college or on their own. So I might be able to keep a lot of it myself. If it's bacon.
Nice.
Good.
That is an absolutely wonderful thing. Is there any plans to take all the recipes readers are giving you and start making a Bacon Master of the Apocalypse cookbook?
There are actually. I've started collecting them. One of the stretch goals that we hope to get to is if we hit that point, I actually want to add some of the recipes in kind of between the chapters, either that or at the end of the book, and open up for the creation of the Bacon Master Cookbook, which I am planning for, later this year. But if the Kickstarter, accelerates and we get to that point, I'll do it sooner. But yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. We started kind of collecting and loosely putting that together already, and it's going to be pretty epic.
So if this sounds interesting to you, they're at the halfway point of their $10,000 goal for this book. So absolutely, if this is your thing, get it while it's getting good. We'll be loading this interview up as soon as we're done on Wednesday. So you have 9 days left if this is your thing. And if you are finding this after this backs, because I'm going to hope it does, a year from now and you want to find it, you can go to his website where he links all of his books. Speaking of websites and your internet presence, where can listeners find you?
Yeah, great question. So my website is frankmorin.org. You can see all the books and everything there and reach out to me. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok are kind of my primary location. And I've got a YouTube channel that I'm going to start filling in as well. But Facebook, the author Frank Morin page, you can get on the Bacon Master of the Apocalypse group page where we're talking a lot about this stuff. And you can listen to the sample, the audiobook sample that we just came up with. And or find me on Instagram at Morin Writes. And TikTok is Frank Morin Author. So yeah, please connect with me. I'd love to hear from you.
All right. And you can find us, dear listener, over on Twitter at twitter.com/SF_fantasy_show, Sierra Foxtrot _fantasy_show. You can email us at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. We have a Facebook group where all the shenanigans happen at facebook.com/groups/blastersandbladespodcast. Again, /groups/blastersandbladespodcast. We have a Facebook page where you can also follow us. Do that. When we get enough, we'll be able to give it a dedicated URL. But in the meantime, you can type it in the search bar and it will show up. I promise you, dear listener. We have a website, anchor.fm /blasters-and-blades. Again, anchor.fm /blasters-and-blades, where you can listen to the show and support us for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on. Or you can support the show more directly over at buymeacoffee.com /author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com /author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it is for the podcast. I promise I will keep my co-hosts, Doc Cisca and Nick Garber, duly baconized. They will have bacon until their taste buds explode into light. And oh, what a way to go if you're going to die. I think
Absolutely.
that's the chef's kiss ending right there. So with that said, thank you for coming, Frank.
Yeah,
and thank you, dear listener, for spending some of your precious time with us. For the absent Nick Garber and Doc Cisca, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thanks for stopping by, Frank.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, now go click that link, buy his Kickstarter. Do your part, people.